Number one, I'm not defending saying what Putin's doing is good. I'm saying internationally with sovereignty, you have a problem. You have this line, you have the line written in, again, like I said, a ceasefire that was brought, and there's been no end to the conflict. Both sides, I'm gonna explain to you, internationally, one side does not agree with the other side's conclusion. And in the country itself, they do not agree in and of themselves. So while we have a particular issue, you have 200, like I said, 20,000 people, it's already above that, but we have that recorded, who now have passports and citizenship of Russia in the eastern part, which means that they have voluntarily applied and agreed to annexing themselves.
That's what Russia does. They did it in Transnistria. They did it in South Odessa. This is what Russia does. You can't ship passports into an area and say, look, we sent a lot of people there, now we own it.
Just listen to what I'm saying.
Yeah.
Because it's not a defense. I don't think Putin's good. I'm saying there is a problem because it is not that there was just an issue and the Donbass region was independent. There was a military siege that has been going on, including shelling, which has led to many deaths in the region in the last 8 years from Western Ukraine to make sure that this region was not being self-governed. Now, you might say that that was good. Okay, fine.
The shelling came from both regions,
yes,
right? This has been, just to be clear, this was internationally investigated. There is no genocide going on of Western people shelling. And I've seen the maps where people will say, like, well, the majority of the shells land in the eastern part. You can look at the maps of where these explosions happen, and 98% of them are directly on the border.
Destiny, I did not say genocide.
Sure,
I'm acknowledging deaths. I'm acknowledging an active conflict. This is an active conflict.
An active conflict. Do you also acknowledge that Russia has troops on the ground, not like arms, not secret people, but actual Russian military in the Donbass as well, right?
Yes, and I would say that the United States and NATO also always has advisors in every single country.
The United States and NATO do not have military presence in Ukraine anywhere remotely.
Advisors, not military. I said advisors.
Okay, sure, but again, equivocation. Advisors is a lot different than troops on the ground.
So let me explain. So again, I'm going here. So you have this issue. They believe that they are being unequally targeted. And of course, the munitions, would you say this at the very least, that some of the funding and the money that Western Ukraine is getting from the EU, getting from the United States, is coming from Western governments, and that we don't know exactly how it's being used, and many of which what we're understanding or what we're seeing probably was used to supply munitions that would break the Minsk II agreement, including a certain amount of distance that artillery could be fired. My point is that when you look at this, the people of Eastern Ukraine, the people who were there, do want independence from the West. They see themselves as distinctly different people, a part of a federation. So my point of saying is that if the West really wanted there to be peace, why would they continue shelling? Why would they continue an active approach to this and not knowing or not realizing that eventually something like this was going to occur? And this is why I believe they're evil. I do what I'm saying that. I believe
it's easy to understand why, because they don't want to just lose part of their country. Yes, the Minsk agreement was broken, but it was broken by both sides multiple times. There is no worldwide consensus.
Why would they not agree to neutrality? Why would they not agree to the draft?
Why would you want to agree to just lose part of your territory when a foreign country has already stolen part of your country, when Crimea has already been invaded and stolen by Russia? Why would you agree to just let go of more? And why do we only talk about the Minsk agreement? There are so many different agreements that have been broken. What about the Budapest Memorandum in 1994, where Ukraine agreed to give up all of their nuclear weapons in exchange for all of the world nuclear powers to not invade their country and steal shit, which is exactly what Russia did in 2014 when they invaded and stole Crimea, which is exactly what Russia did from 2014 to now when they invaded the East and they tried to break away 2 states, which is exactly what Russia did this year when they sent troops in and they've tried to take Kyiv and they've tried to take other parts of the country. Like, there are tons of agreements that have been broken, most of them on Russia's side. To keep pointing to the Minsk agreements over and over and over again when these things have been unilaterally broken by both sides because it's a separatist war, because it's really messy, and because Russia is sending actual troops and arms and soldiers to that part of the country to have the conflict go on indefinitely, like, yeah, of course, I wouldn't expect Ukraine to just say, okay, well, you know what, you win, we're just going to give up this part of our country now.
So that is a total recognition, specifically, you have to agree that the actual regime that is in there was duly elected. And the problem with this is, with Ukraine and its identity and what was going on, is that, yes, you go, why would they want to give up part of their land? Well, here's why I say Ukraine is evil, because ultimately speaking, people thought, and I know this genuinely, specifically looking at the amount of refugees that we have from Ukraine, that somehow Ukraine could be a NATO member. Now, there are many countries in Europe that are not actually NATO members at this point. It is shocking to me how many want to join now, but some countries have realized they need to stay neutral. This is even in world wars. You have, Switzerland, etc. Even now with Sweden, people are saying, hey, we've stayed neutral. We don't want to join NATO. We don't want to provoke anything. We're not joining that military alliance, getting involved in your global wars. We are staying independent. So the point is that Ukraine is in a position to where I believe through state media they were lied to in saying, hey, you can just become a partner of the West, and you can. This is why, again, I said I won't defend Putin, because I'm saying, look, the real situation is that this is sensitive. The situation is not that Ukraine has been solidified as a peaceful country that has a unified people that all believe and want the same thing. things. Whether it's Western or Eastern propaganda, I believe there's lots of it. I don't believe anything that comes out of the Kremlin and, quite frankly, out of our own administration. But at the same time, when you look at this, you go, the idea of a presentation that this country can just be annexed or move itself when it's in an active conflict that is not even recognizing its own ceasefire is a disservice to its own people that is leading to unnecessary loss of life. And that, while you might say, well, he would have invaded anyway, or he would have, annexed the territory in Donbass, or he would have not, went any further into Mariupol, or even looked at the actual region. You go, okay, you can argue that, but at the same time, universally speaking, what a travesty it was to realize that there was an understanding of communication in the UN Security Council that this was the status, that if this happened and that the US tried to take them into NATO, which they're asking for membership, that they would invade. There would be warfare, and they wanted to avoid that, hence the 2 draft resolutions in 2021. And we knew this because BBC was reporting, I think in November, I remember, that there was the buildup of Russian troops already happening, and that Russia was very upset with the lack of acknowledgement and agreement of what was going on, a lack of further expansion of NATO. They were clear on what they wanted, and so what I'm saying is, you kind of sound like you think I'm like, yeah, Putin's great, he's awesome. I'm going, the West and the East have used this now as a point of contention, of conflict between where their military power comes and goes.
I understand that you might not necessarily be defending Putin. The equivocation between joining NATO and Russia taking you over is just laughable, right? There's a saying in Eastern Europe. It's like, if you ask for the U.S. to come, the U.S. comes. If you ask for Russia to come, Russia comes. If you ask for nobody to come, Russia comes. This idea that Russia, and again, every single thing you're saying is framed through Russian interests, which I don't think supersedes Ukrainian interests. Russia does not have the right to invade a country just because they're worried that they might join NATO. And that's really it. It's not even that there's going to be an invasion. It's not even that there's going to be missiles launched into the Kremlin or into Moscow. It's just because, what? Because they think they have the right to run states that are next to them, because they're using this idea that they can just run shit is ridiculous. And even this idea that, well, there's a conflict going on in the region, so of course they can't join NATO. Like, again, that's the story of Georgia. In 2002, 2003, when they considered joining NATO, all of a sudden you had Russian peacekeepers moving into the south to help kind of these, separatist conflicts that were going on, until eventually they broke away states in 2008. And now that's the same thing you see in Ukraine as well. 2014, they steal Crimea, and guess what? Hey, can't join NATO because, oh, look, you've got a civil war in the east. They just got a whole lot harder for you. These are Kremlin talking points. The idea that, of course you can't join NATO. Look, we're hitting you right now over and over and over again. You got to wait till we win. That's insane.
You said your worldview in the beginning, that the state of the world, the security of the world is under this mutual or universal agreement of not invading. Unfortunately for the West and idealists and people who are pro-NATO, that is the assumption that all countries think like that. China does really technically not think like that, and they're amassing a military strength, and we're going to see what happens in the next couple decades, especially with Taiwan. Not all countries do think like that. Many of them just have not had the military advantage to continue what they wanted. The USSR did not think like that. Look at what all the proxy wars happening in South America and in Central America. That's a very new understanding. We've had world wars in the last 100 years. So this idea that that's just universally accepted is more of a modern and a new idea. I am saying that we obviously wanted to think that Ukraine, and we told them that, like what you said, that's the lie. Yeah, why would you not just respect your own universal sovereignty? And you can do what you want. Unfortunately, Russia doesn't play by those rules, which is why I can't defend them. But they have to understand and at least respect the fact that they are different, and understand they do have a military, and as we're seeing today, they are willing to use it. And so we came in there with this understanding, like, well, Ukraine, you did have a fair election, even though your own country can't decide that it did. And there's clearly a line of division, in fact, a military line of division in your own nation of people who still disagree for 8 years. This isn't just a 6 months of disagreement or a January 6th worst insurrection in American history.
Zelensky is like one of the most popular presidents in Ukrainian history. The idea that some people disagree with the election doesn't mean that doesn't give you a right. There's people in the United States that don't agree with our election.
You know what? Someone stole my wife's purse out of her car and broke the window. I'm going to tell him, hey man, it's illegal. I'm under the universal truth that we don't break people's windows and steal their purse. Well, here's the deal.
If you want to go with that argument, that's perfectly fine. But now all you've given is a stronger argument for NATO expansion, which is exactly what we see. Now you've got countries historically that would have never joined NATO.
All you're doing is interrupting. Let me finish.
Well, because you're just saying a bunch about actually defending your point.
I can go walk around and find a dog off its leash and say, oh, well, there is some sort of a law inside of the park that says that all dogs have to be on your leash, but your dog was off it. People don't always play by the same rules. People don't always play by the same laws. The globe does not have a universal law. We don't even agree on a universal God. Not everybody's on the same side, which is why we have things like NATO. Why we have NATO? Because we have countries that we agree to do things a certain way, and other countries are not a part of it because they disagree, which is why they're called our enemies. The only thing falsely holding the world together in some way is the very, very, very thin smokescreen of universal global trade, which is keeping us all together through a mutual benefit. But militarily, we disagree. And I am telling you genuinely, the Ukrainian idea that we told Ukraine that the world plays like like the West does. The world plays like NATO does. Unfortunately, do I agree that Western Ukraine has the right to join NATO, or they do have the right to break away, or they do have the right? Yes, they do. But to not have the people understand the consequences that, you know what, that's great you do, you're going to have to be a refugee. You are going to have a war. Because Russia, they do not mess around. They will invade. Well, that's not right. Okay? I'm not arguing the moral relevancy or the moral equivalence of saying, is Russia morally good for invading? I won't defend that.
That's literally the point of the debate. This isn't a descriptive debate on whether or not Russia is invading. Of course they are. The name of the debate is Ukraine is evil. That is moral. That is a moral argument. So we're having a moral discussion on whether or not Russia should be able to invade. This idea that the world is held together through trade and nobody plays by rules, that's absolutely not true. And it's ahistorical. For the last 30 years, we've enjoyed more peace across Europe and the entire rest of the world than we have through all of human history. And a lot of that is because of all the international norms that we have set up, because of institutions like the United Nations, because of institutions like NATO. And when you try to say these things like, well, you know, Russia doesn't play by the rules, okay, fine. That's an even stronger reason for countries like Ukraine to join NATO. Because I bet that the Baltics, I bet that Romania, I bet that Hungary, I bet that these countries are looking at what's happening. They're going, you know what? I'm feeling pretty good being in Ukraine right now, or being in NATO right now, because I don't have to worry about Russia coming into my country and stealing my shit. So if we want to say that Russia is going to play hardball, they're going to play by these rules, that's fine. We can go that route. But now you've made an even stronger argument for NATO to aggressively expand as much as possible, because now we're going to have to play into the understanding that Russia is going to go in and mess with any country they can, save for countries that are in NATO, because they know they can't get away with it.